10 a.m. I'd like to make a roll call for the members. Please identify if you're present or virtual. Bobby Corey,
Present.
John Davis,
Virtual.
Brennan Greltz,
Present.
Eric Kranzush,
Present.
Keith Curtis,
Present virtually.
Catherine Van Etta.
Present.
Well, I'd like to welcome members that are returning from the previous Emergency Fire Cost Committee, and also welcome our new member, Bobby Corey, representing the grazing landowner, and our Board of Forestry non-voting member, Heath Curtis. So welcome to both of you. I will be facilitating this meeting until the chairperson is elected under the next agenda item. I think we have everybody's names that we don't have anybody that's dialed in, so we're good there. If someone from the public would like to comment during agenda item number 12, the public comment period, please use the chat feature in Teams so we know to call on you. And if you're virtual, you can use the *6 for on the phone, *6 for mute or unmute. The committee members were emailed the meeting material prior to the meeting. All of the meeting material is also available at the Board of Forestry website under Committees, EFCC. If there's anything that we received during the meeting that's not in the package, that information will be updated following the meeting as possible. So just to want to add one slight piece of context before we get into the next agenda item. This is the first meeting of the new Emergency Fire Cost Committee since the passage of House Bill 3940 in the 2025 legislative session that resulted in changes to the committee's membership, its fiduciary responsibilities, and purpose. The new law shifts the committee's focus from large fire to preparedness, essentially towards the district and association fiscal budgets, and retains its strategic investment authority. The committee will consider policy items today to ensure alignment with the House Bill 3940. So with that, I'm going to move to agenda item number 2, where the committee needs to select a chairperson. Again, with the passage of House Bill 3940, a new EFCC was established, and Section 21 of the bill states, the Emergency Fire Cost Committee shall meet and elect one of its members as chairperson. With that, that's what we need, and I will need a nomination from a committee member to elect your chairperson and a call for a motion.
Nancy, I want to start by thanking Brennan for years of service to the citizens of Oregon, serving as chair of the committee. I really appreciate all your hard work and dedication to ensuring our success here. I think with your leadership, the committee is in good standing with the board, with landowners, and citizens statewide. With that being said, it would be an honor to move to select Brennan Greltz as chair of the EFCC.
Excellent. So we have a motion from Eric. Do we have a second?
I would second that.
We have a second from John Davis. Any discussion? All right, then I will take a roll call, ask for an aye for approval and or a no for opposition. Bobby?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Brennan?
Yes.
Catherine?
Did anybody else just lose audio?
I did too, John. I was just going to ask.
Yeah, I can hear you and Teresa. I'm not hearing anybody in the room.
Yeah, it looks like
They're
they
on-
muted.
they're on
muted
mute.
their- Yeah.
Now, can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you, Brennan.
Excellent. So I want to appreciate everybody's valuable time, especially today before Thanksgiving. And so not to delay, let's continue to move through the agenda. Agenda item number 3, we need an approval of the minutes of the September 2nd, 2025 meeting. These meeting minutes were from the old EFCC prior to Bobby and Heath joining the committee. They did have an opportunity to review them, so I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes as emailed.
Catherine, I move to adopt the minutes of the Emergency Fire Cost Committee from September 2nd, 2025 via Teams as written.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. All right, all those in favor of adopting the minutes as presented, respond with aye.
Aye.
Okay. Are there any opposed? Nope. All right, the motion carries. Thank you.
Chair, I abstained, just I was not part of the committee.
Understood and appreciated. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 4, fire season report. Mr. Curran, welcome.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, Michael Curran, I'm the Fire Protection Division Chief for the Oregon Department of Forestry. Can folks online hear me okay? Okay, sounds good. Jen, do you have that PowerPoint? Okay. I do got a PowerPoint I'm going to go over, and maybe while that's getting loaded, really just want to reflect a little bit. So I'm going on 10 months on this job or in this job. Just completed my first full fire season. And so I've been with the agency for, I think this was my 20th year. And really a cool just experience for me, like worked very locally in the districts out in the field my entire career, and really just super appreciative and thankful for really just the complete and coordinated system in general across the state. It's really cool just to see the partnerships forged right at the district level, at the Salem level here with our landowner and operator community and all of our partners. And just really cool thing to see statewide, just how all that works together seamlessly. So just want to thank the complete system overall, whether that's the districts and Salem staff, our incident management teams, our landowners, operators, and our various partners that are around the state, whether it's our RFDs, working with OSFM and our federal counterparts. There's obviously a lot of things to work through, a lot of issues to work through, but it just amazes me the continued working together that we do to try to solve them all. So just want to reflect on that, and just a really cool thing to see statewide. And I wanted to start with a good thing because my presentation ends on some issues we got to work through, and it's more just an eyes wide open discussion for us all to be tracking. So apologies, I got to end on those. So I at least wanted to start with the good things. So. Okay, can folks online see the PowerPoint? Like we got a thumbs up. So, all right, perfect. Continued IT workarounds for the Tillamook room. Gotta love it. So in all, kind of reflecting, and I touched on some of this at the September meeting, but maybe just a high level for folks. So interesting spring going into this summer. Really had really good moisture totals in terms of rainfall and snowpack throughout the winter and early spring, to where April we were actually drought free in the state of Oregon for the first time since 2017. So I think everyone was really happy and in a good spot going into fire season 2025. Unfortunately, that faucet turned off somewhere around that second week of April, and we ended up drying out more quickly than I think what folks were expecting. And with that, had an early start to fire season, and that was indicative with the Rowena fire. And then just really a continued onslaught of lightning throughout the summer. And you'll kind of see that in some of the stats that we've got, and then I'll go over today. But one of the things I do want to recognize, right, there's a lot of things out there in terms of, 2025 was an average fire season. It was a good fire season for us. And in terms of initial attack, that's correct. But I don't want to lose sight on a couple things. One, I don't want to lose sight on, from a large fire perspective, we definitely were slower. But I do want to recognize some of the impacts that we had this summer, in particular with the Rowena fire and the flat fire, and 60 primary structures lost between those, 56 of those coming from the Rowena. And that's a big deal that I don't want folks to lose sight of. And we need to recognize just the significant loss that the public had, that they did experience their home being lost, and multiple other structures and outbuildings. So I don't want folks to forget that. And I want to recognize that just with the loss that was experienced. So, but in all, from initial attack perspective, I would say very successful this summer. With the lightning, I saw a stat with some forecasters we work with out of our interagency office up in Portland between the BLM and Forest Service, that this is the most lightning we've seen in well over a decade. But thankfully, a lot of that came with moisture, albeit just with a couple smaller storms that did come in dry that drove some of the large fires in the state. But in all, from an initial attack standpoint, very successful at the district level. So just shout out to our district staff for the work they're doing locally. But in all, we had about 177 more fires. But ultimately, only 8% of the acres versus our 10-year average. So to me, that's a success locally at that initial attack level. Our benchmark is 98% of ODF fires kept at 10 acres or less. Unfortunately, we did not meet that. And that's been really a tough target for us to meet with the increasing fire seasons we've seen. And we've got it as part of our strategy over the next 2 or 3 years to try to see if there's a different performance measure there that we either need to tweak or look at measuring differently in terms of measuring success, because we actually haven't been able to meet that since 2004, I think. So it's been a while. In all, we had over 3,700 response calls throughout the summer. So that includes our statistical fires that we actually have to go put out, and then either doing mutual aid fires with our partners and or what we call non-fire crew actions. So responding to a smoke chase, a regulated use violation, things like that. So folks were busy all summer long. With that, we had 6 IMT deployments across the state with ODF teams. So successful year with our state IMTs. Each team was able to get out twice and put their practices to test, and an all very good success. And again, some of the more notable fires in terms of what our IMTs were on, I already talked about Rowena and the challenges there they had to face with an early season fire and just the amount of homes lost. But the Grizzly Complex comes to mind, just with the sheer square miles they had to cover with 72 different fires across the Southwest Oregon. The team didn't take all those. The district maintained a lot of that. But it was just such a large geographic area, and trying to support that logistically is very challenging. And with a very good safety record at the same time, just kudos to Team 3 that was out there for that one. And then don't want to lose sight of the flat fire. Probably one of the most complex fires in the nation this summer, just with the vicinity of the sisters and the impacts to neighborhoods and homes. But I think a lot of good success stories of recent mitigation work that's gone on historically, and where we were able to actually catch the fire before it actually got into the community of sisters. So very impactful fire, but I think there's some very good lessons learned in terms of mitigation strategies moving forward that we can actually put into practice elsewhere around the state, which will be a good thing. And then I also want to highlight Team 1 that was on Kelsey Fire. Some of the most challenging ground you can get to in this state. And we were able to do that with minimizing the most acres burned. And the district was almost able to support that fully in-house. It just became a challenge logistically. And with the sheer, just where that fire was located in some of those steep canyons along the Rogue River, they ended up needing help with one of our teams. But that was not easy ground to fight on. And again, a stellar safety record in a very challenging environment. So those were just some of the notable team fires that we were on. And with that, we had 73 days in all of team deployments to large fires with over 350 people across the agency. And also just want to highlight and keep at the forefront just the work we're doing within the Northwest Compact and with our state-to-state agreements to help bring in resources from outside the state to assist us. We had 183 personnel come to Oregon to assist us from 17 states and Canada. And really just, I mean, shout out to all of them for the help, but California in particular, they came to our rescue in early July when we had 2 team deployments back to back. And they actually helped us staff one of our fires to where we can focus all of the internal ODF staff to the other fire we sent a team to on the Elk Fire in Klamath Falls. So Cal Fire really came to our rescue there where resources were a little bit short at that time, just given the amount of lightning that we saw. So maybe if we can go to the next slide. And if folks have questions throughout, just raise your hand or interrupt me. Happy to stop and take those. So yes, yep. Dealing with some arson related fires in the Klamath Lake area. We're able to come in and help us with those and really provide some guidance to us on what we can improve internally with some of our own investigation work that's going on. So but yes, good work and assistance they provided from the investigation standpoint as well. So, so really with this one, this is just the current year based off our 10-year average. 69% of our fires are human caused, and definitely the uptick with lightning. We had 4% more human caused fires than our 10-year average, but 67% more lightning causes than our 10-year average. So this is just kind of that quick graph look at what I mentioned earlier in the previous slide. So again, just highlighting there was a ton of potential this summer, but due to the quick, rapid, aggressive initial attack that our districts had with our Salem staff supporting them, we're able to minimize acres burned and keep a lot of large fires off out of the state. So unless there's questions, next slide. Okay, so this just kind of goes through kind of acres burned across the past couple decades. As you can tell, definitely those large fire seasons stick out, whether it's 2020, 2021, and 2024. Obviously, 25 was much less, but just thought this was a good kind of view that folks can see that how fire season 2025 correlates with the past couple decades that we've seen. So I think we can go on to the next slide unless there's questions. And then this one's looking at all jurisdictions and really the take home point here, and this just points to the system we have here in Oregon, the complete and coordinated system and how closely we work together with our partners and our landowners and operators in all. And this is just a standing testament to previous fire seasons as well, especially over the past decade. But in terms of ODF and acres burned, 30% of the number of fires statewide, but only 7% of the acres. And to me, I think that's something for us all to be proud of statewide in terms of ODF protection. So, okay, go on to the next. Okay. Really just some stats, and won't go over too much in detail with this, but I think really just highlighting the importance of safe, effective, and aggressive initial attack response. And by doing that, you're limiting your risk exposure over time, that if some of these fires, they would have gotten large, right? Some of our safety stats would look a lot differently. But do want to highlight just some of the safety trends that we're seeing and some of the top injury categories. And those really haven't changed over time. Those are fairly common for us moving forward. But again, in terms of the overall fire response picture in the state, from a safety standpoint, something I'm continually impressed with all of our staff across the state at just prioritizing safety and how, minimal safety issues we run into during what can be, right, a fairly dangerous profession, right? And, these charts are going to look different compared to other states and agencies, but I think why we have such a good story to tell there is just with that safe, effective, and aggressive initial response and how we can minimize the number of our safety-related incidents. So, and as usual, right, our trends always ramp up during the summertime because that's where we bring on the most staff that we've got across the agency with our seasonal workforce. Then they obviously go down in the shoulder seasons. So again, unless there's questions on that one, we can move on. Okay, so large fire costs for the state, this just kind of shows the pattern over the last 10 years. But in particular for fire season 2025, just so folks are tracking, we have spent roughly 130 million in gross fire costs this year, with a net of 60 million. So that 60 million is what ultimately ODF is responsible for. The difference between that and 130, those are all reimbursable costs that we should be getting back, whether it's FEMA, other federal agencies, cost collection, you name it. And really just a shout out to Nancy and with her leadership with some of the EFCC eligibility changes that were made. This was the first summer of those. And I think what we're seeing is some good things that I think we can continue as we shift over to the large wildfire fund and eligibility changes. They're going to look fairly similar. There'll be some little nuances, but there'll be a lot of similarities. But we're very clearly getting in a spot where we can separate suppression versus readiness, and we can maintain control of budgets a little bit more closely. And there's not so many unknowns of, well, does the district have a bad fire season? And they're going to end up spending more money than what we weren't expecting. And we can manage the funds a little bit easier now just with those changes. So just a shout out to Nancy and her leadership and the work our PFU staff are going to do to kind of take this forward into the future. And we'll be talking about this a little bit more later on the agenda, but still want to see a role for EFCC in large fire somehow. More work to do there to figure out what that looks like, but want to make sure we maintain that. But just so folks can see, fire season costs in my eyes seem to be a little bit higher than what we would see on a normal fire season like this, but a lot of that's being attributed to some of those eligibility changes we've seen. And so instead of hitting district budgets, now they're hitting the large fire fund. And again, I think it's overall a good thing for the overall system. Any questions? Okay, so the last slide, and I'm sure there'll be questions from here. So just looking forward, I did want to provide just some big rocks that Kyle and myself and Kate and other folks in the agency are working through and dealing with. So everyone knows about House Bill 3940. That bill did a lot of good work, but it also left in this initial biennium some shortfalls, I would say, in funding until we get to the next biennium when everything turns into our current service level. So we are working through an issue where with what we're referring to as centralized administrative costs. So headquarter services, area costs, and then the admin prorate for our public landowners. Those won't be hitting district budgets anymore, which is a good thing. However, we didn't get adequate enough funding to fund all those services the second fiscal of this biennium. So we have some work to do in the short session to try to right size that. And it's something we'll continue to work on. And then moving forward too, there'll be continued meetings on now with the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund not being a part of large fire and all those dollars reverting back to the district budgets to help lower readiness costs at the initial attack level. We still got some work to do on just how the flow of those dollars are going to work and all the fund types those are going to hit to bring down the overall cost of fire protection overall. So a lot of people working behind the scenes to make sure all this stuff works the way it should. But just know those are continuing things we continue to work on. Some of you have heard of this, some of you may have not, but we have this topic of what we're calling general fund divergence for our protection program. And ultimately what that means is the amount of general fund we're being given for the protection program is not keeping pace with what costs we have. And there's some things driving it to where in statute, landowners are not supposed to pay more than 50% of those costs. To make up that difference, we have to have the additional general fund to back that up, which we don't have. A lot of work going on behind the scenes to figure out what drivers are mainly causing that. And there's more work to be done. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to put some work on in the short term until we can make sure that we're adequately funded from a general fund perspective for the fire program to try to tighten the belts a little bit across the board, whether it's our districts, whether it's headquarter services, you name it, to where we can kind of slowly land this plane to lower the divergence overall amount and buying us more time until we can come up with that long-term solution. So budget instructions with a little more clear sideboards and do not exceed amounts are going to kind of be the norm for us for the protection program moving forward until we have that long-term solution. But just know that we kind of got an issue here we got to work through in the interim. So hopefully we can get in a better spot long-term. We don't have to talk about this again. That's the overall goal. So any questions on that one before I move on to the last two? Okay. The third one here, so protection standards policy. This is a good thing in my perspective. So going back to the, I guess maybe going back to the divergence piece, one of the things I should have mentioned, right, is we essentially have two competing statutes working against each other. So we have the statutes that say we have to stay within our biennial budget authority. And then we also have ORS 477 that states we have to provide an adequate level of protection across the state of Oregon, an ODF protection. And those two things are clearly not in alignment. And one of the long-term solutions we have to help get 477 in alignment with our biennial budget authorization is to essentially have good data for us to anchor into to go ask for money the right way to back up what our adequate level of protection is. So those two statutes are aligned and hopefully are aligned moving forward with no issues. And part of that's going to be, well, the big driver for that's going to be our protection standards policy. The old one we've had is outdated. A lot of the folks that are used to working on it have left. It relied on an old formula that folks just don't truly understand anymore. So we're anchoring into a new process for districts to be able to go through a protection standards review with an outside committee that has both outside folks and internal folks, and really driving home and putting data together in terms of where are your short gaps, where are you actually meeting expectations, and then what's the nexus there for increasing capacity or making any changes that you need to make in order to have that adequate level of protection. That policy will be final by the end of the calendar year, to where hopefully by January 1, there's a new policy and process to lay out for the districts. And we're going to try to come up with a strategy. We can't have all of our districts asking for a review day one. We'll kind of have to do this systematically to where maybe we pick 2 or 3 districts to pilot it right out the gate. And we kind of, okay, this is where we missed on the policy. This is where we got it right. And we make some tweaks. And then hopefully we'll have a better plan moving forward that everybody can ask for whenever they think they need one, working in conjunction with their FPAs. And then later on in the agenda, right, when it comes to our protection standards review, I think this is a really good spot for EFCC to potentially get engaged. So I want to keep that as part of the conversation moving forward. Because landowner involvement in our protection standards review is going to be key for this whole thing to be successful. So we got to maintain that. And I think that's both at the local level with the Forest Protective Association, and that's going to be also at the statewide level from an EFCC perspective. And then the last one here, I think there's a lot of thoughts out about this one, and definitely a lot of unknowns. And we're still kind of learning what all this is going to look like still. So I don't have a lot to share, but I think folks are tracking some of the executive orders from back in DC in terms of consolidating and unifying the federal fire agencies. So Department of Interior and USDA, Department of Agriculture, Forest Service. And there was a lot of talk about consolidation right out the gate, and that's kind of been scaled back to now there's this term called unification. So kind of what that looks like from what we know to date, and there's still a lot more to learn on this. So if there's questions, I may or may not be able to answer it, but essentially what we'll see is the Department of Interior, which is BLM, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, BIA, and National Park Service, they're going to consolidate all under DOI and now work for this new U.S. Wildland Fire Service. And they'll report to this new reporting structure. They'll still work for their respective agencies, but the fire staff now just report to this unified fire service for DOI. And then USDA, the Forest Service, will maintain their own fire program as well. There'll still be a nexus to this U.S. Fish or Fire Service. Sorry, I get Fish and Wildlife and this Fire Service mixed up. And how all that's going to work, still getting ironed out. But where the unification's coming in now is there's some very clear text around Department of Interior, BLM, Forest Service. You guys need to work together to really get your policies and procedures lined up so there's no differences. And I think there's a lot of really good that can come from this because there's a lot of talk about getting more timely payments back to state partners, getting to more timely payments back to vendors and contractors, which I think are huge. Lining on aviation policy, so there's no difference. So I think there's a lot of good that can come from this, but I think a lot of unknowns that we're going to have to work through. But just know that's out there, and we're trying to engage the best we can at Kate's level through the National Association of State Foresters. They're kind of taking point with various work groups on all the different parts and pieces of this. And I think they have some pretty bold timelines. But we'll see. It sounds like a lot of this should be in place prior to fire season 26, but time will ultimately tell where we end up with it. So there's a lot of noise in the system about this, but it is something we're closely tracking, and we'll continue to engage and update folks as best we can. That's all I had. Sorry if I went long, but a lot to cover from the past summer and go from there. So any questions, or maybe Kyle, did I miss something? Your level.
Thank you, Michael. Before we move into any committee discussion on that, I want to recognize Ms. Skinner for joining us. You're not obligated to say anything, but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity if you so desire.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I was a few minutes late. Michael prepped me. No, I did just want to come on and just say thank you to everybody that's been working on this transition of EFCC. Michael spoke to it a little bit, but just thank you to everybody who's been working through the process, working through trying to create this new system for us. And welcome to the new board members that have joined the group. So I really appreciate, this is going to be, as Michael said, this is going to be an important group for us and committee to help us brainstorm as much as the financial pieces of it and to really assist us there. The only other piece I wanted to add was I was on a call yesterday, as Michael talked about, with this National Fire Service that they're working through. And I think folks that do know Greg Smitty is our representation there for the state foresters. And what he said yesterday was there were no red flags in the new organization. So we all left there trying to be very optimistic about what this is going to be and more efficiencies that we think we'll see moving forward. But thank you. And again, thanks to everybody that's here and participating.
Thank you. Committee thoughts on that topic discussion. Okay.
I was just going to say,
Oh.
it's like we all have a lot to do with the leadership of the agency. And it looks like the expertise that this committee can assisting with agents. I appreciate you looking towards this as
I have a couple closing comments. One, Michael, I want to recognize and applaud what a successful year we had. We had, as you mentioned, an overabundance of lightning and an alarming amount of human-caused fires. And it's the leadership that ODF has from your level and yours too, Kyle, all the way down to the firefighter one out on the line to do that work safely and as effectively as we were able to do it. It was a challenging year. The public may not recognize it, but it truly was a challenging year. And the success that we showed, that ODF and the association showed, was exemplary. So thank you for that. This committee recognizes that, not just me, but everybody here. And Catherine made a good point. One I want to double down on is that, members of this committee are brought on because they have experience working with their local districts on the associations and on the budget side of things. And so the expertise that we can provide as ODF moves forward into some new challenges and looking for solutions, that that'll be valuable, and I appreciate, I had written it down here, but you already jumped on it. I appreciate the desire to have EFCC be a part of that. And I think we're going to be very willing to be a part of that, with the eye towards this committee as a representation of the landowners. And always ensuring that whether it's the feds or the state or the associations, keep that as their focus, the service that we're providing for the landowners. So, all right. Last opportunity from the committee. Bobby.
Yeah, I have one thing. We talked a little bit about state to state agreements in the Northwest Compact. Locally there in Eastern Oregon, we had some CAL FIRE guys that were, they filled in out of Pendleton, and I happen to be involved with a little bit with that fire and those individuals. And I think that's very important to continue that when we maybe need a little more leadership in some roles. I really appreciate, those folks showing up. Just want to add to that. Thank you.
I just wanted to echo the appreciation that's been given on the aggressive initial attack this summer. I think, I could see it in folks here in Southeast Oregon. They were getting a lot of wins on each day, and we've had a lot of years here recently where we didn't get those wins on a daily basis. So, folks worked hard, and it paid off. A lot of aggressive initial attack, and really good job for the summer. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Bobby. That's a good reminder, I think, to the benefits of 3940 passing. So, obviously we're trying to go after 8 million in additional severity dollars, only ended up with 4 million, but we're still able to get that to good use. But what that 4 million did buy us was the flexibility to go add that CAL FIRE resource to go to Northeast Oregon and sit in Pendleton for a couple weeks, maybe even longer in some cases, to where we can add some bench strength and just some additional coaching for some of our younger firefighters. So that was a direct reflection of what the good that 3940 brought the system in terms of additional severity dollars. And that's something that we want to prioritize moving forward to maintain that flexibility. So Pendleton can still go ask for that CAL FIRE resource if it's needed. So.
Excellent. Okay. Go ahead.
Michael, just wanted to thank you for welcoming EFCC onto the divergence work group. I know, I don't want to speak for Nancy, but from my perspective, I learned a great deal. Being able to look at the agency budget from a different perspective is always huge to us. I had a summary written up for the group to report back kind of on, what we saw from the work group, but, your presentation did such a great job of identifying kind of what the challenges are there between our two policy mandates that we're trying to balance. What I do want to say is thank you for your leadership on that group. Leaders can take on a couple of different roles. Some of them can ask extremely difficult questions and tackle the problem at hand, and others may sweep things to the side. Your leadership there was spot on there. You were asking the difficult questions. People were squirming on calls, and we had to have uncomfortable conversations. But to get to the bottom of the problems, that was what was needed. And so on behalf of, us as a company and landowners, thank you for asking those difficult questions and helping us get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's still a lot more work to do there. And we'll keep the group apprised of what comes up. But I think just a general understanding and awareness and what we're telling FBAs at the annual road shows, right, is to ultimately get where we want to be, to allow maximum flexibility at the local level to make the decisions you need to make for what adequate level of protection is we're going to kind of have to feel some pain in the short term to get to the ultimate long end game that we want to be at again. So things will look different in the short term for sure, but I think it'll be a good thing for us in the long term. It's just things will look different for us.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item number 5. This is just an informational item and some chair comments. So I'll kick it off. This is really intended to set the stage for this new EFCC. And I want this committee to understand and the public to understand that it is vitally important that this committee's North Star remains very clear, that we represent the protection paying landowners across Oregon. With that comes a significant fiduciary responsibility, and every decision must honor those who fund the system, our rural residents, our grazing lands, and our forest lands. Under House Bill 3940, our role within Oregon's statewide protection system has expanded and evolved. We're no longer fully focused on large fire costs. And moving forward, we're going to be responsible for auditing district budgets against adequate level of protection standards, maintaining engagement in large fire cost audits in partnership with ODF, and ensuring we can provide a financial backstop when critical needs arise through loans from the fund, whether to ODF or to the operating associations. These responsibilities are essential to sustaining operational readiness and financial stability across our collective protection system. Additionally, but no less importantly, this committee will continue to guide strategic investments that strengthen our preparedness across all districts. So looking ahead, we have significant work to do. This committee has a fair amount of work to establish some committee policies and some formal rulemaking. We need to provide clear guidelines these guidelines will be critical to implementing these expanded responsibilities effectively, both now and thinking long-term into the future. The guidelines need to be consistent, fair, and transparent so that all stakeholders can ensure that what we are doing and what is in alignment with 3940, as well as establishing long-term success with an eye towards long-term success, and that is both financial and operational success. All this must support a wildfire protection program that enhances preparedness and reinforces Oregon's unique public-private firefighting model, one that really does make us nationally recognized. And I think inside the state, it's hard to see that, but I work with a lot of stakeholders, across the US, and our system here is the envy of many other agencies who are in charge of fire protection there. We can be proud of that, but that also sets us as a leader, and we need to embody that leadership and continue to do the right things that those before us have set us up for success. So I'd now like to invite Mr. Williams and Mr. Curran to share their perspectives of this committee and 3940 and their insights into the operational priorities and statewide coordination that will help us understand how EFCC's change can be translated into action, both at the state and at the district levels. Kyle, Michael, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Brennan. And for the record, just to introduce myself, Kyle Williams, Deputy Director of Fire Protection here at ODF. Appreciate it, Brennan. And you led in with the critical nature of the partnership between landowners and ODF. It's really our shared protection system. If you look back into how we got to where we are right now, the landowners in this state have a responsibility to provide fire protection on their lands, and they do that through the good folks here at ODF. And I see the Emergency Fire Cost Committee as we move forward as an extension of that partnership. And we talk about, in terms of that engagement across many different spectrums, whether it's in the large fire realm, right? Looking at how we're doing our audits and participating in that joint leadership around presenting the case that every dollar is spent, well, in terms of the stakeholders, the taxpayers, our efforts. And then as we turn to, the district budgets, the preparedness you mentioned, making sure that we're strong to move forward into the future. ODF can do a lot, but we can't do it by ourselves. And that's not just on the fire line, that's in the legislative process, that's in, every conversation that we're going to have in order to continue to make sure that this is a strong organization and our ability to protect Oregonians. And so as I envision, EFCC and future landowners
helping us continue to look around the corner in our budgets, in the way we deliver service, in the way we're constructed. We just had a really cool conversation this morning about, you know, the 100 years that brought us to this point, and the fire regime and just the general environment we're operating in are nothing like what they were in 1960, let alone 1913 when this thing was created. So how are we going to adapt? And again, ODF could probably put a lot of stuff on a whiteboard and try and get that accomplished, and we would make it nowhere. And we already recognize that the fire situation is outpacing a lot of the ways we're addressing it. And I really believe that through partnership with this group, we can finally see, you know, how do we catch up and how do we stay caught up? Michael's been talking about that a lot today. Let's get to zero and stay there, and then move forward with a foundation that will withstand the people that are sitting around this table, right? The system has to be built to be able to continue to move forward regardless of who's here. And so that's the long-term vision that I've got for the EFCC in partnership with the department. It's our shared organization, our shared mission, and shared responsibility.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Not a whole lot other to add with what Kyle just mentioned, but kind of where my mind goes is really the accountability piece, to ensure that all parts and pieces of that complete and coordinated system are working the way they should. And I'm a firm believer, right? For us to be able to go tell our story, we have to be able to show that we're accountable, right, for everything we're doing, whether that's how we're spending the dollars, the service we're providing. And EFCC can help make sure that we are being accountable for everything we're responsible for, and we're trying to do things the right way. So there's a lot of different parts and pieces where EFCC can get engaged. I've mentioned a couple key ones already, right, with the protection standards. Kyle mentioned the budgeting piece. Those are going to be the ones right out the gate that I think will do good. But I think overall, we need to continually define those ways to where you can assist us from that accountability standpoint to make sure we are doing what we should be doing. And stay on top of us for that. So that's kind of where my mind goes with it, above and beyond with what Kyle just mentioned.
Thank you both. I think that sets a good forward path. Some leaders' intent for both the committee and from leadership, where we need to go and what we need to keep as our, as I said, our North Star. So, thank you. Let's move on to agenda item number 6. This is some business the committee needs to undertake. Nancy, the floor is yours.
Right, good morning again. I'm Nancy Hirsch, Administrator for the Emergency Fire Cost Committee. Due to the passage of House Bill 3940, the current Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund Oregon administrative rules are no longer relevant. This agenda item outlines a proposal to repeal the current Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund Oregon administrative rules in Chapter 629, Division 165, which includes 000 through 0320. And I'm going to summarize each of the proposed rule repeals. So the first one is the -0000 relates to definitions, and the proposed repeal eliminates all the definitions which have been changed or no longer have merit since the passage of the House Bill 3940 language. For the -0010, this is related to the additional amount not considered emergency fire suppression cost. The proposed repeal eliminates any nexus to daily deductibles that were removed in House Bill 3940. Under the -100, it relates to deductibles amount per acre, and the proposed repeal eliminates any nexus to acre deductibles that were removed in House Bill 3940. Under -210 relates to the transfer of funds from the state treasurer. Proposed repeal eliminates borrowing money from the state treasurer because of the changes that were made in House Bill 3940. The new law shifts the committee's focus from large fire to preparedness where expenditures will not exceed revenues, therefore no need for loans. Under dash 300, related to the claims process and evidence of necessity, the proposed repeal eliminates any nexus to payments claimed from the fund for emergency fire costs that were removed in House Bill 3940. Under dash 305, related to the qualifications for payment, the proposed repeal eliminates language for any qualifications for payment of emergency fire costs from the fund because of the changes in House Bill 3940. Dash 310 relates to payments for fire suppression costs. The proposed repeal eliminates any payments or claim of emergency fire costs from the fund because of the changes in House Bill 3940. Dash 315 relates to the collection and approval process. The proposed repeal eliminates language no longer needed that was updated in House Bill 3940. This relates to the collection of fire suppression costs from a responsible party, which is spelled out in the new bill. Lastly, dash 320, reimbursement to the account. The proposed repeal eliminates language no longer needed related to districts retaining a certain amount on reimbursements not paid for by the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund because of the changes in House Bill 39. Those costs should now be eligible for reimbursement from the new large fire fund. With that, my recommendation is that the Emergency Fire Cost Committee direct the Emergency Fire Cost Committee Administrator to proceed with the public hearing process and return in January at your regular meeting with the final repeal language for Chapter 629, Division 165. If the EFCC gives direction to move forward, I will schedule and hold a public hearing, tentatively looking at December 18th. And then I would also return with any comments from the public at the January meeting. So with that, that's where we're at.
Thank you for that. Any questions or we seek a motion? Nope. Okay. Can we entertain a motion to initiate the public hearing process with this staff report that Nancy provided? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'd move that we, oh, go ahead, John.
I'll move that we initiate the public hearing process, but
Thank you, John. Can I get a second? Is there
Second.
a second? There's a second by Eric. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor to initiate the public hearing process consistent with the staff report, respond with aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. All right, that takes us to agenda item number 7, rescinding the eligibility of the firefighting cost for the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund policy. With the passage of 3940, the EFCC OFLPF authority has shifted from paying for emergency fire costs to district budgets, as I discussed. And there's no longer any authority needed for this policy. I think this is just good governance to not leave things on the books that are no longer relevant. So I would like to look for a motion to rescind the eligibility of firefighting costs for the OFLPF policy. I get a motion.
I'll move to rescind the eligibility of firefighting costs.
Thank you, Bobby. A second?
I'll second.
On seconds. Thank you. So the motion on the table is to rescind the eligibility of firefighting costs for the Oregon Forest Land Protection Policy. All those in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. And we can close that. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8. This is a work group construction discussion. So we've just completed some good governance, and we have some more work to do on that that Nancy will carry forward. Thank you. But beyond the work we've already completed thus far today, the EFCC has 2 major areas of policy development stemming from 3940. My vision is to establish a collaborative work groups that includes EFCC members, staff, and ODF representatives to address the needs that I'm going to discuss here in a moment. These groups should focus on creating a framework to guide the committee's work. And my expectation is the work groups will outline a work plan, draft a framework for rule concepts with some options, and then bring these concepts and the work plan back to this committee for deliberation and decisions on what should move forward to rulemaking. For policy and standard development, I believe that our committee staff can support this work, and I'll work with Nancy to ensure this work is addressed and brought back to the full committee for discussion and final direction. The rulemaking work required in House Bill 3940 is detailed in your meeting packet under agenda item 8. And specifically, there are 2 statutes that we need to look into. One is ORS 477.760, which is to adopt rules relating to the administration of the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund under our new charge, as well as annually determine the unencumbered balance of the fund as of the end of the preceding calendar year. This is a process that we did when under the existing fund, but now that we have a new direction of those monies, we need to reestablish some of those rules. The other is ORS 477.770, which is to set forth a process for reviewing the distribution of monies from the fund and establishing best practices for reviewing forest protection district budgets and emergency fire suppression costs. That is a pretty heavy lift for what I see as two separate items. This work really needs to begin in January, which is right around the corner, and will be a priority for this full committee in the coming year. So next week, I've asked Nancy to follow up with each of the committee members to identify your areas of interest and marking your top 3 priorities. And then we will collaborate with ODF, and we have to be careful that this will only include 2 EFCC members at a time, so to avoid a quorum and violate public meeting laws. So it's going to be kind of a ranked choice, and then we'll sit down and decide how to distribute the workload. On these meetings, I would anticipate would largely be virtual, and we'll work with people's busy schedules to get it done. But I will be pushing hard that we set some timelines, deadlines to continue to move this process forward, so that by the close of the coming calendar year, this committee has good direction and good policies, which we can always modify as we encounter new things and changes. But we're pushing forward and giving the districts, the landowners, and ODF some much needed direction and leaders' intent on how we're going to engage as the previous discussion at the district levels, at the state levels. So you'll be hearing from us. Any questions, comments on that topic? Catherine?
Slightly confused about how many. So I've lost the big picture there.
Sure, and that's like the clarity will come in the follow-up email. I think that there likely will be perhaps three under the second one that I mentioned, 770, right? Both distribution of money from the fund, as well as best practices for reviewing district budgets. I mean, we can choose to break things up into small buckets or we can keep them large buckets. We need to look at that also to have some follow-up discussions with ODF to see some of these topics are going to be easier than others. We need to set it up so that we can be in the most efficient way and practical way possible. Largely, as I think about this, the hardest challenge will be coordinating schedules to put this on the calendar and make some of these things. So it may be more efficient for one topic in particular to be broken up, whereas others can get lumped together. We'll send out the email that details more explicitly what the work is and what the work groups will be. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair, yes, I believe it makes sense because we are cutting whole cloth here. And so I just want to make sure that the audience knows that we're trying our best to navigate the making and to redo our approach at this point in time. And in order to do that, we need to have some flexibility when we start the rulemaking process in order to understand the steps that need to be gone through. And so I figure that if I'm slightly confused, that there are people out there in the public land that are slightly confused. So I can definitely see that ORS 477760 breaks down into the financial running of the work that we're doing, and could be one, and is one pot of it's looking over the money. It's the financial work. And then I can also see that 477.770 is the disposition of monies and looking over the association budgets out there, that those almost become two more. And I'm thinking that could be how the logic of the process is going forward.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Yeah.
That helps me, and I think that it might help viewer land understand that as we start the process, we are trying to do it in a logical format to conserve our resources, but also so people.
Correct. And to be clear, these work groups are going to be providing something for the full committee for discussion and deliberation. And so there will be opportunities for those not on those work groups to have input. And then for those that need formal rulemaking process, the formal public rulemaking process will be followed for that. Once this committee decides to move forward with something, then we'll have that opportunity as well. So any other questions on that? Excellent. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 9, which is an update of the EFCC membership policy. Nancy, can you please provide a staff report?
Good morning. Again, I'm Nancy Hirsch, the Emergency Fire Cost Committee Administrator. Purpose of this agenda item is to update the Emergency Fire Cost Committee membership policy to address statute changes in House Bill 3940 from the 2025 legislative session. This is a decision item. Passage of the bill requires changes to the current policy. You have both a proposed track change version and one that does not have the track changes in your meeting material. I'm going to walk through a summary of the proposed changes. So under the authority term, we have removed the language members, terms, vacancies that were also taken out in House Bill 3940. Under definitions, 3 were added, one for the grazing landowner, another for large forest owner, and also a definition for small forest owner. So all of those are consistent with the bill language. Would probably note there was a previous version that was initially sent out that had a typo under the small forest owner subset A, where it had 500 instead of 5,000. So you should have a corrected copy, and that was corrected on the EFCC website as well. Under responsibilities, language was added stating the Board of Forestry shall appoint 6 members to the committee, including 1 non-voting member and 5 voting members. Added language stating that the committee may make recommendations to the board concerning minimum qualifications for serving on the committee. And lastly, added language stating that the committee may establish standards, requirements, or procedures that the committee considers necessary for effective administration of the committee. Again, this language came right out of House Bill 3940. Under standards, language was changed from 4 to 5 to reflect the new number of committee members that are appointed for 4-year terms. Under the committee chairperson statutory requirements, we removed chairperson will hold office for a period determined by the committee, again, consistent with the law. And then under the committee membership statutory requirements, we've added the language for 2 members that are or are representatives of large forest owners, 1 member who is or is a representative of small forest owner, and 1 member who is or is a representative of an owner of grazing land as defined in ORS 477.205. And for all of these landowners, their lands must be assessed for forest fire protection within a forest protection district. 1 member also appointed at large to represent the groups already identified. So, and we also added language to address vacancies on the committee consistent with statute. And under minimum experience and representation, language was added to address the addition of the grazing landowner on this committee. And under membership, recruitment, and application, language was added to address vacancies on the committee. And also in the outreach process of our solicitation, wanted to ensure that it included the Oregon Cattlemen's Association, Oregon Farm Bureau, Oregon Sheep Growers Association, Oregon State Grange, and Oregonians for Food and Shelter. That would all receive information on any recruitment notifications. And the last 2 were essentially housekeeping. So with that, that would bring your membership policy in alignment with House Bill 3940. And my recommendation is that the EFCC adopt the proposed changes to the Emergency Fire Cost Committee membership policy effective today.
Any questions? And actually, before y'all talk at once, because we're a chatty group, I do want to point out that the definitions of large and small forest landowners mirror that which is already in statute related to tax and private forest cord recognition of type of landowners. We have alignment there. Any comments, questions from committee members?
A dumb one, Nancy, on the bottom of the second page, I think your second and third bullets are all a single sentence. You should consider merging those if you're going to finalize the document.
Could you say that one more time?
I was gonna say, at the bottom of the second page, you've got a series of bullets, and I think the second and third bullet are all a single sentence. That is to say, one member who is or is a representative of a small forest owner whose forest land is being assessed for forest fire protection within a forest protection district. That shows in my draft as being two separate bullets. So you fix it as you will.
Copy.
Thank you. Both. So I would look for a motion to adopt this membership policy with a slight change in removing the unnecessary bullet line wrap. We entertain a motion.
Chair Geraltz, I would move to update the EFCC membership policy consistent with House Bill 3940 as presented by Administrator Hirsch with the formatting adjustments as discussed.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
By Bobby, a motion by Eric. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve the EFCC membership policy consistent with the staff report and adopting the small formatting change, respond with aye.
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 Okay, the motion is unanimous and it passes. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 10, the 2026 meeting schedule. So meetings of the emergency fire costs statutorily have to occur quarterly. Special meetings may be called by the chairperson or by a majority of the voting members. And also be aware the act or decision of a majority of the voting members shall be deemed as an act or decision of the committee. These are lifted directly from statute. So meetings we have scheduled out into 2026 will occur on January 6th, March 3rd, June 2nd, and September 8th, which coincidentally are generally the Tuesdays before the Board of Forestry meetings. That actually worked out from scheduling with ODF staff as the best available day for them. But it had always been a bane of my previous experience with this committee that it had to happen on those days. I tried to avoid that, but right back where we were. We do have more flexibility than we previously had, where it was stated in statute we had to meet the Tuesday before. So thoughts, comments? Great. Let's move on to agenda item number 11, the administrator report. Before I hand the floor over to Nancy, I do want to give warning to any of the public that the next agenda item is the public comment. So while Nancy is providing her administrator report, I would appreciate if you would either raise your hand or make a comment in the chat so that we can quickly jump to that and avoid the 30 seconds of awkward silence. All right, Nancy, the floor is yours.
Okay, Nancy Hirsch, Administrator, and probably just two brief items. With the prior Emergency Fire Cost Committee, there had been some ongoing work related to reconciliation from earlier fiscal years. Over the past, well, pretty much through the summer, we have had a couple, 2-3 meetings with ODF staff and but don't have anything new to update on that topic, but just wanted you to know that some meetings had occurred. And then really, I would just say that obviously with all the policy changes that have been made, the work of your staff is also changing. And so we remain in somewhat of flexibility, but looking forward to rolling up our sleeves with you and supporting the work that you do as you really set the foundation for the future. And I obviously will be following up next week, probably by the middle of the week, relative to the work group discussion that was had. I have, thanks.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Okay, Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 12, the public comment, and good for the order. I do see one hand raised. And before we offer the mic, is there anything in the chat? Okay, the chat appears clear. Ms. Lynch, floor is yours. I believe you're on mute, or we can't hear you. We still can't hear you, but we do see your chat question. Can we address it there? Can you provide a thumbs up?
For the record, those of us joining remotely can't hear her either.
Yeah. Okay, it does mark you as muted. Can you see if we no, technically, since we can hear Heath and John, we should be able to hear all participants. All right. Apologies, Ms. Lynch, not understanding what the technicality is, but can you open the chat, please, so that I can read her comment? Want clarity on budget issues 2026 requests. Down our revenue forecasts for now 3 to 4 years ahead. I will open the floor to the ODF staff to address that. I think that question came during the fire report.
Yep, maybe I'll kick it off here and Kyle and Kate can jump in if they need to. Peggy, I'm making the assumption it's based off the 3940 shortfall in the second fiscal year that I mentioned in my report. And yes, that is going to be a short session request for 2026. Still undetermined what that looks like. Obviously, we are tracking the downward revenue forecast that just came out. And I'd classify it as there's conversations going on behind the scenes for what that looks like to make sure we're best set up for success there. But there are unknowns given the recent downward revenue forecast that we don't know if we'll get it or not. And that'll be a more clear picture for us, obviously, once the short session concludes. But it is something we're tracking, and we are going to move forward in the short session with that ask.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for working with us, Ms. Lynch. All right, any other final comments from committee members?
Chair, I just want to, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this new EFCC and look forward to rolling up my sleeves, getting my hands wet on moving forward with the new direction of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. I'm glad we have representation from the grazing community on here. I think that makes this committee for who we, as I mentioned, are responsible to. It makes us stronger. So, and yeah, you roll your sleeves up. We got work to do this year. Anything else from committee members? Also, I'm going to look to, I don't see John or Heath hearing as though they want to say anything, which is fine. All right. With that, I thank you all for a productive meeting. We concluded some good business today, good governance, and we've got work ahead of us. So I will, hearing nothing else from committee members, I'll adjourn the meeting as of 11:19. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next meeting.
Thank you.